Iran and the United States have had no formal diplomatic relations since April 1980. Pakistan serves as Iran's protecting power in the United States, while Switzerland serves as the United States' protecting power in Iran. Contacts are carried out through the Iranian Interest section of the Pakistani Embassy in Washington, D.C., and the U.S. Interest section of the Swiss Embassy in Tehran. In August 2018, Supreme Leader of Iran Ali Khamenei banned direct talks with the United States. The American newspapers in the 1720s were uniformly pro-Iranian, especially during the Mahmud Hotek's 1722 revolt against the Iranian monarchy. Relations between the two nations began in the mid to late 19th century, when Iran was known to the West as Persia. Initially, while Persia was very wary of British and Russian colonial interests during the Great Game, the United States was seen as a more trustworthy foreign power, and the Americans Arthur Millspa and Morgan Schuster were even appointed treasurers general by the Shahs of the time. During World War II, Persia was invaded by the United Kingdom and the Soviet Union, both US allies, but relations continued to be positive after the war until the later years of the government of Mohammad Mossadegh, who was overthrown by a coup organized by the Central Intelligence Agency and aided by MI6. This was followed by an era of very close alliance and friendship between Shah Muhammad Reza Pahlavi's regime and the US government, Persia being one of the US's closest allies, which was in turn followed by a dramatic reversal and disagreement between the two countries after the 1979 Iranian Revolution. Opinions differ as to the cause of the cooling in relations. Iranian explanations include everything from the natural and unavoidable conflict between the Islamic Revolution on the one hand, and perceived American arrogance and desire for global hegemony on the other. Other explanations include the Iranian government's need for an external bogeyman to furnish a pretext for domestic repression against pro-democratic forces and to bind the government to its loyal constituency. The United States attributes the worsening of relations to the 1979-81 Iran hostage crisis, Iran's repeated human rights abuses since the Islamic Revolution, and its growing influence in the Middle East since 1995. The United States has had an embargo on trade with Iran. In 2015, the United States led successful negotiations for a nuclear deal intended to dismantle Iran's nuclear weapons capabilities, and when Iran complied in 2016, sanctions on Iran were lifted. The Trump administration withdrew from the nuclear deal and re-imposed the sanctions in 2018. Since this time, relations between the United States and Iran have worsened, and the two countries came close to conflict during the 2019-20 Persian Gulf crisis. According to a 2013 BBC World Service poll, 5% of Americans view Iranian influence positively, with 87% expressing a negative view, the most unfavorable perception of Iran in the world. On the other hand, research has shown that most Iranians hold a positive attitude about the American people, though not the US government. According to a 2019 survey by Iran Poll, 13% of Iranians have a favorable view of the United States, with 86% expressing an unfavorable view, the most unfavorable perception of the United States in the world. According to a 2018 Pew poll, 39% of Americans say that limiting the power and influence of Iran should be a top foreign policy priority. Relations tend to improve when the two countries have overlapping goals, such as repelling Sunni militants during the Iraq War and the intervention against ISIS. Political relations between Iran and the United States began when the Shah of Iran, Nasiruddin Shah Kaya, officially dispatched Iran's first ambassador, Mirza Abolhassan, to Washington, D.C. in 1856. In 1883, Samuel G. W. Benjamin was appointed by the United States as the first official diplomatic envoy to Iran. However, ambassadorial relations were not established until 1944. The first Iranian ambassador to the United States of America was Mirza Abolhassan Khan Ilchi Kabir. Justin Perkins and Asahel Grant were the first missionaries dispatched to Iran in 1834 via the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Missions. The US had little interest in Persian affairs, while US as a trustworthy outsider did not suffer. The Persians again sought the US for help in straightening out its finances after World War I. This mission, unlike the last, was opposed by powerful vested interests and eventually it was withdrawn with its task incomplete. Following this, there was no special US concern with Iran or any interaction until World War II. Amir Kabir, Prime Minister under Nasiruddin Shah, also initiated direct contacts with the American government in Washington. By the end of the 19th century, negotiations were underway for an American company to establish a railway system from the Persian Gulf to Te.